Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the EJC online classroom platform. My name is Patrick Thompson. This afternoon, we'll be looking at mathematics, and the topic that we'll be looking at is understanding decimal place value. Just before we begin, I know you should be aware that we all have to sanitize. And if you are going outside, you might say, sir, you're not wearing your mask, but I have my mask with me. I'm in studio, so there's no need for me to be wearing it just now. So before we begin our lesson today, we are going to have a word of prayer. Kind Father and our God, we give you thanks for today. As we go through our lesson today, we pray, Lord, that we will all benefit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So we are going to be doing some recap. I'll step across so you can come with me. As I said earlier, our topic is understanding decimal place value. Our number system works with 10 digits. These digits are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whatever numbers we are using, these digits will use to create all the numbers we are using. So in previous lessons that we have looked at, we would have looked at whole numbers. Whole numbers starts from using this digit 0, 1, 2, 3, and it goes all the way. So I can create even a double-digit whole number. So let's say I want to create the double-digit whole number 10. I would choose the 1 and I would choose the 0. I create the number 10. So that's for whole numbers. I can come over to counting numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It goes all the way up to infinity. So if I want to create a counting number, say 121, I would choose my 1, choose my 2, and choose my 1 again. So I would be using the digits 1 and 2 to create this number for my counting numbers. If I wanted to do odd numbers, same digits that we're using, we would use odd numbers, numbers that are divisible when divided by 2, they leave a remainder, 1, 3, 5, 7. If I want to create a number like 33, I could use 3, and I could use 3 again. I could look at even numbers. Same digits in our number system. Numbers that are divisible by 2 without leaving a remainder, 2, 4, 6, 8. If I want to create the even number 46, I can choose the 4 and the 6 from the digits here. In doing this, I am making use of all the digits here. Now today, we are going to be looking at understanding decimal place value. And so, I want you to look at this image that I'm going to be putting on the screen. I'll be putting this image on the screen. If you can see this image on the screen, I'll come back in a second. Let me just put this across. Put this right across. We are going to be looking at our decimal numbers. Now, what makes a decimal number different from all these other number concepts that we put on the board? It's a very important number that we use in our everyday experience. Anybody remember the World Championship where Usain Bolt ran that amazing time for a new world record of 9.58 seconds? If I had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 as digits on the board, it wouldn't really make any sense if I am going to have a value to it if I want to have a decimal number. So a decimal number is a number that uses a decimal point. It's a key concept. It uses a decimal point, and decimal numbers are related to fractions, and they are also closely associated with percentages, which we have looked at. Now, our place value system is a system that uses a base 10 system. Remember in earlier lessons, we looked at our 1,000 column, hundreds, tens, and ones. And these are the columns that would come. These are the columns that would come down. So if I wanted to interpret what these digits mean, this would be our 10,000, and this would be our 100,000. So I would start by putting in my 9, my 8, my 7, my 6, and my 5. You can see that I'm moving in the direction towards the left. Now, in giving meaning to these numbers, I would have a set 5 10,000, 6,000, 7 hundreds, 8 tens, and 9 ones. But I want to ask you a question. What would come before the ones? What would come before the ones? And this is where we would have our decimal concepts being introduced. We would regard right here, as I make a notation here, I could just put DP right here, and this would represent our decimal point, the line right here. Now, it's interesting that you know that our number system that we use is the base 10 Indo-Arabic system. And it's a system of 10. Basically, each column or units, it takes 10 ones to give you 1 10. It takes 10 tens to give you 100. So each column, it takes 10 of this to make 1 of this. It takes 10 of this to make one of this, and 10 of this to make 1 of this. So if I just put down the digits that we looked at earlier, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if I had a 5, and if I had a 6, 7, 8, to put meaning to it in this case as a whole number, or even as a counting number, when I put it on my place value table, then I would get meaning. It's the same principle that is applied to decimals. But what makes decimal numbers unique is that decimal numbers use a decimal point. So let's say we wanted to write back this same number, but we want to have a decimal part to it. So I could put my, let me give some space. So let's say I wanted to have a decimal value of 5 10,000, 6,000, 700s, 8 tens, and 9 ones. I could also say, call this by one name, 56,798.52. I would have to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.52. My decimal point now would be right here, where this would now be 0.1, and we will go further into this, and this would be 0.01. Now, how did I get from ones to 0.1? Mathematics is a very fascinating subject. When we move to the left, we are basically multiplying by 10 to give us each new column. So it takes 10 ones to make 110. It takes what? 10 ones to give us 110. It takes 10 tens to give us 100. Now the reverse happens when we are going towards the right. So if I have 110,000, when I go to the 1,000 column, it can be shared up 10 times. Remember now, it's the same principle, we're just going into the reverse. So if I were to take 3 steps across, 1, 2, 3 steps, in going across, I would have to take the same amount, 1, 2, 3, to go back to my same place. It's the same way in our decimal, in our number system. Going to the right, it takes 10 units here to make 1. So each time we are creating a new column, it is shared up using the same principle of 10. 110,000 will contain 10 1,000. 1,000 will contain 10 100. 100 will contain 10 tens. 110 will contain 10 ones. And we can look at it by using a simple method on the board. We can use our tally system. I'm sure many of us can remember when we were in lower grades where we can have our bundles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a bundle of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These would be 5 units and another 5 units. If we were to combine them together, we would end up having 10 units. 10 units. So we are saying if I have 10 units of 10,000, if I'm going to carry it over to the 1,000, 1 unit of 10,000, 1 unit of 10,000, from this I'm going to get 10 units of thousands. So it takes 10 1,000 to make 1 10,000. 1 10,000 contains 10 1,000. So we are looking at our decimal system, which shows values which are now smaller than 1s. So these are values over on the right-hand side. We are not focusing on these primarily today. We will be focusing on the values at our decimal point right here, our DP, which is our decimal point, which will be values less than 1. Now the question is asked, how did we get the point 1? So I could put I'll call these slices of bread. I will call these my slices of bread. I'll go over to my PowerPoint and let you see it clearly on your screen. Now, if you look carefully, on my screen, I have my slices of bread. I hope I'm not making anyone hungry today. Now, I went to the store today, putting on my mask and all, make sure that I'm sanitized, keep my social distancing, and I bought a bread which had 10 slices. Can you count it with me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now my whole bread contains 10 slices. If I were to give each person in my class a slice of bread, so let's say I gave Peter would get 1 out of the 10 slices. If I gave this to Rosie would have gotten 1 out of the 10 slices. If I give this to Mark would have gotten 1 out of the 10 slices. If I gave this to James or John or Mary or Martha or Judas, you could see that each person in the class would receive 1 out of 10 parts. Now, the 1 out of 10 parts is telling us that our bread contains 10 in the whole. This is where I get the whole concept that we use in our decimal system, our base 10 system, where that 1 out of 10 parts, remember I told you that fractions and decimals are related. So let's go back to the screen so I can show you the slices of bread. This would represent 1 out of 10 part. This would represent 1 out of 10 part. This would represent 1 out of 10. All these here. And we would have our 10 slices. So over on the other side, just the same. The 10 slices of bread in the bag that I bought this morning would represent 1 whole. Now, on my decimal table, on my decimal place value table, let's say I gave Mark his slice. Then I would have Mark's slice. I'm going to erase my board. Let me go get my eraser. So let's put this aside now. I'm dealing with my slices of bread. So I'll go all the way down here. So let's focus on that. So I gave Mark, I did not give him the whole bread. My whole bread has 10 slices. But I gave Mark a portion of my bread, and it would be 1 out of 10. Now, when we were looking at fraction table, we can have our fraction, having our numerator, and our denominator. Now, remember, decimals are not fractions. Decimals are used with a decimal point. It's just showing us, using a decimal point, our fractional value. So they are really the same concept, but written in a different form. It's like having Jamaican money and having US money. They are still monetary values, but they have different weights, or you'd say different construction, or how they are made, different look or stuff like that. So fractions and decimals are related, but they're just written differently. Fractions are written with a numerator, number at the top, number at the bottom, fraction divider. Our decimal is written with a decimal point. So this 1/10 in decimal form, that's where we get our 0.1. Now, the 0.1 here tells us that the 1 whole is divided into 10 parts. Remember, 1 whole contains 10 parts. So our decimal is a part of our whole place value system. When we were moving to the right, it takes 10 ones to make 1/10. It goes the same way in reverse. When we have 1 1 and we are going to make it into decimal, this becomes 10. It has 10 parts, but this section represents 0.1. It goes all the way up to 9, just like how the 9s will, for ones, you will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you add another whole number to it, you get 10, which would have been a new column here, and that's how you get your 10s. So we can have our 9 here. If I were to add another whole number, it's going to create a new column, which is called our 10s column, and so it is written, we would have 1/10 and no more 1. We put it down here. If we were to say put 2, we would have 9. Added 2 ones, we would have 1 here and 1/10. So we would have 1 1 over here and 1/10 over here. And it's the same thing with our decimal. Same thing with our decimal. So let's go back to our slices of bread. Mark got 0.1. That's 1/10. So I put it here for him. Mary, this is Mark. And this is Mary. If I were to put another here, Mark's share and Mary's share would be 1 out of 10 parts and another 1 out of 10 parts. So I would end up having 2 out of 10 parts. Now this 2 can be written also as 0.2. If I'm looking at both values combined. That's how we get our decimal value. We have 0.1, we can have 0.2, we can have 0.3, we can have 0.4, we can have 0.5, we can have 0.6, we can have 0.7, we can have 0.8, we can have 0.9. What would I ask you comes after 0.9? We would say, using our ones column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But in decimal terms, we don't say 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. We don't say 0.10. This is where we would have, when we reach the 0.9 here, if we were to put 0.1 here, it would now become a new column, which is now our ones. So just as how 10 ones give 1/10, 10 1/10, or 10.1. So for fractions, I'm sure you would have seen this before, 10 out of 10 parts would be equal to our entire whole bread right here. The 10 parts combined. It's the same way if we were to have 10.1. If we have 10 of these, it's going to give us 1 whole. So let's look at it. If I were to write down 0.1, 0.1, I'm going to write down all 10 of them. All 10 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2 to go. If I were to write all 10 of them, they would give me 1 whole. And it's the same way with our fraction. If I had 1/10, I could have the 1/10 all the way 1/10. Let me clear right here. Or I could just use my diagram up here, make it easier for everyone. If this is 1 out of 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This would represent 1/10. I could also put my point here if I was using decimal, because if I have 10 parts, then each part would represent 0.1. So my bread that I have in fraction, if I was using fractions, because decimals are related to fractions, I could use from the numbers in my number system, I could use this for my fractions. So 1/10 would be for my fractions. And if I'm using decimals, it would use 0.1. So remember basically that decimal numbers, it's very important that you understand, in order to identify decimal numbers, we must have our decimal point. Our decimal points make us know that we are using decimal numbers and that we are looking at values basically which are less than 1. So let's look at that one more time just in case I've missed anyone. I'll just go back over a second. Our decimal system is a part of the whole extension of our number system. We have our hundreds. Let me just put a little value here. Our hundreds. And we put our 1,000. I'll just use these two for now. Going to the left, our system goes up a higher value. We go by 10. 10 ones gives us 110. 10 tens gives us 100. 10 hundreds give us 1,000. In going to the reverse now, if we have 1,000, it will give us 10 hundred. So we're going to the reverse now. We're going to the right. It would give us 10 hundreds. If we're going to the tens, 100 contains 10 groups of 100 contains 10 tens, and 1 10 contains 10 ones. It's the same principle going back now, where one whole or one unit contains 10 1/10 fractional value or 10.1. Now, my question to you is, after 0.1, I had put 0.01. We can further divide. Mathematics is such a fascinating subject where we can further divide numbers as far right and as far left. If I were to continue from my 10,000s, as you would have learned in other classes, I could go to my 100,000s. After my 10,000, I have my 100,000s. After my 100,000s, I have my millions. Then I have my 10 millions. Then I have my 100 millions. And then I have billions of values. It's the same way going across to the right. When we're in class or when we're working with math as human beings, we use a particular part of the continuum, we would say. We use a part that is relevant to us. So a good way to remember it, this is referred to as stent, and right here would be referred to as hundreds. Hundreds, sorry, TH, make sure the TH is there. So these are tenths, and these are hundreds. Now, the difference with this is that this bread contained 10 slices, but let's say we were sharing for, it's COVID time, people are in need, and so we would normally have a bread that we share for 10 persons. People are struggling. We had to share this bread for 100 persons. That's where our representation here, where this would now, in terms of fraction part, this would be 1 out of 100 parts. And it's now referred to in decimal as 0.01. It's a new column. It takes 10 100 parts to give us 1 1/10 part. Let's go over that again. It takes 10 of this to give 1 of this. It continues just the same way. 10 of this makes 1 of this. Doesn't matter where you are on the continuum. If you're going to the left or right, remember, we are using the Indo-Arabic system, which deals with groups of 10. It's a base 10 system. What is fascinating about this, we might see and think that it is something new. But if you look in your Bible all the way into Genesis, there was a tithing system that the church uses even today. And if you ask anyone, what is the value of the tithe that I need to return to the church? It's going to be 1/10 of what you earn. So if you had 10 slices of bread, as we looked at earlier, and you wanted to pay your tithe, then you would take out a portion, 1/10, and you would give it to your church as tithe. So it's not a new system. It has been around. It's just that it's now being used worldwide. So the Bible has some amazing principles that we are still relevant and still being used today in a different sense. But it has been around. So let's go back over to what we have looked at just now. We are extending our place value to include understanding decimal place value. And we are looking at using our base 10 system. Just as how when you were working with whole numbers, decimal numbers, remember now, must be written using a decimal point. And it's very important that we use a decimal point. If I were writing down digits like 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, but the number that I wanted was 356.9, if someone were to look at this number, they would not know that I'm referring to that particular number. They would give it their own value, which in this case, it's a 5-digit number, they might put it that way. But my decimal points creates the reality that I want. So it's 356.79. I will go back over to my PowerPoint so we can continue to look at what we are Now we can look at using manipulatives in the classroom to help with decimal understanding. So I'll come down. We have our different units that has to do with our place value system. We have the units of 1 as we were on the board, and we looked at 1. It takes 10 ones to make 1/10. You can see the strips there right in the middle. You can also, I don't know if you're seeing it on your screen, my place value thing. If not, I'll go over to the board and show it to you. We could use our manipulatives. Let me go over. Let me see if I could show you our building blocks. I wanted to show you on the PowerPoint our building blocks. So if you have used the cube before, if you have used the Rubik's Cube before, we could use it like that. We could have one flat face. We could have a strip right here, coming down, sorry. We could have a strip right here and divided it into 10 parts. So we could have our imagery. It's not drawn to precision like that, but this is our Rubik's Cube. Wanted to show you on the PowerPoint. So this would represent our 1,000 units, our 100 units, our tens units, and our 1 unit. I wanted to show you that. Now these are just a little demonstration to show you that we could use our building blocks when you are doing your formation, where it would take 10 of these to make 1 strip, and then it would take 10 strips to give you right here. We'd have 10 of these strips running across. Make it a little bigger. And this would be our 100 units. And then when we put 10 of this together, this would more look like a cuboid, a cube, and a cube rather, and it would give us our 1,000 strips. Now, what am I trying to say? That decimal numbers can be used to represent any value that we want. It doesn't have to stop. I can have a decimal number, 539.03. I can have 2.1. Any number that we want, we can write it in decimal format. There's a dynamics where we can go back and forth. So let's go back to understanding our place value system. 1,000, hundreds, very important, tens, ones. Right here would be our columns highlighting, and right here would be our decimal point. Just let me put the DP. Now you're in the computer era. It would be our 1/10. I'm just using the fractional part for you to have that memory that it's related to. It would be 0.01 or 1 out of 100 parts. Can anyone tell me what would come here if we're looking at the pattern? You can simply reflect back over here where you have ones, tens, hundreds, thousand. Right here we would have, following the pattern, 0.001. So that's 0.001. And that would be 1 out of 1,000. And if you were to go further, you would get 1 out of 10,000. If you were to go further, you would get 1 out of 100,000. Those are very, very small parts. But most times where we're using, we would use up to 1,000 parts for our reference for math at this point. But for you to remember it, you can also look at its tenths, hundredths, thousand, the regular spelling for these, remove the S, you put your TH, and you will get your decimal parts and portion. It's very important that you remember that decimal numbers must be written using a point. Just as when you're writing fractional numbers, you have a numerator and a denominator. It's very important that when you're writing with your decimal numbers, you use your decimal point. So if I'm going 2.3, my decimal point is very, very important because it lets me know the values which are less than 1. Very, very important. Now, we can look at using decimals in real life. Have you ever listened to a radio station? Does anyone knows the dial for NCU radio? Does anyone know that? This is usually a decimal number. And there's a prize for someone who can tell me. This is a decimal number. So if you were to tune into NCU radio, it's going to be 100 and something or 90. I'm just giving you a clue. You can tell me what it is. There's a prize for you. So if it has to do with radio, you're going to hear a decimal number being used. So this is decimal in real life. Anybody has been to the store lately? Has anyone been to the store lately? When you're at the store, the cashier that is checking up your stuff, when she's adding up, you will see on the screen your dollars and cents. They also use a decimal divide using the point. Has anyone been to the gas station? Has anyone been to the gas station? When you're purchasing daddy or mommy, or even you're purchasing gas, you're going to see them using a decimal number. So these are decimal numbers in real life that you use. You could look at it in another way. If anyone loves sports, remember we spoke earlier about Usain Bolt. His world record run is 9.58. That's a decimal number. So when you think of decimal numbers are used in everyday life, everyday experience. It's very, very important that you recognize that we are not just using these concepts in mathematics and you're not going to be using them again. Right around the world, whether it's listening to the radio, whether you're shopping, whether you are buying gas to move around, social distancing now, we know we're not going to go out as much as we can. We have to make sure that each time we go out, we sanitize, we wear a mask. So we're not going to just get up and drive and go to the gas station. But you might be at home and you're watching Usain Bolt breaking the world record. And there's another one that I said that is used in everyday life. When you're paying your tithe. It's the same thing where you actually give 0.1 of your earnings, which is the same as 1/10. That's a very important concept. And this is all the way from Genesis. This is from the book Genesis. So it has been around a long time. So if you are at home and you're not able to come to church and you want to make sure that your church system is running and you're a supporter and you love the Lord, you can make sure that you give your 1/10 virtually. You calculate, if I have 10 slices of bread, then I know that one of the slices that I have, I would give it to my church. So whether it's giving tithe, whether I'm listening to sports, all these are showing that decimals can be used in real life situations. Very important for you to understand that this concept is a very powerful concept and it can be used in real life situations. Very, very important. So I will go over a few recaps, and then I can assign you a task to see if you are on point. So let's go back before we get our work to do, all right? We say that understanding decimal place value is going to come from our understanding of the number system that we are working with, and it's a base 10 system. So I'll just go back, put this on the board for you. I'll just start with my hundreds, tens, and ones. And right here, I would have my 1/10 or my 0.1. Right here, I would have my 1/100 or my 0.01. Right here, I would have my 1,000. We just learned about that, or my 0.001. And these are columns. Now, I want you to remember that all these columns are related. All these columns are related. This is the part that we are mostly accustomed to. All right, I put my DP, my display pic on WhatsApp, my decimal point. Our ones, our tens, and our hundreds, decimal point shows us values which are less than ones. Now, if I want to find a unique number, so just like how I would have the whole number that I started out, and I would put right here A, B, and I have C, I could ask you which of these numbers represents a decimal number. And we would have our key concept. Our answer would be C, of course, because we say that our decimal number must be written with a decimal point. It's very important. Must be written with our decimal point. So it distinguishes it from fractions. This could be our counting number. This could be our whole number. It could be our counting number, a whole number, but our decimal number as a decimal point. So it's very important that when you are writing decimals, that you don't leave out your decimal point. It's very, very important. Now, I hope and trust that you would have gained some understanding from that as it relates to understanding decimal place value. So our decimal place value lies right after our ones. It goes all the way, as I said, it continues on and on, just as how forever and ever and ever, and just as how our whole numbers continue from hundreds of 10,000, 100,000. It's the same thing that goes down. But for you to bear in mind that we are working with a base 10 system, it shows that we all have to remember that it takes, coming to the left, it takes 10 1,000 parts to make one 100 part. It takes 10 100 parts to make 10 110 to make one 110 part, and it takes 10 110 parts to make one 1 part, units. And it takes 10 units to make 110, and it takes 10 tens to make 100. So it's very important that you pay attention to such things. So understanding decimal place value is linked to understanding our regular place value. It's very important that I say this to you, that when you are moving to the right, you will find that your values increase. When you're moving to the left, you will find that your values increase, and when you're moving to the right, your values. So you're basically multiplying going this way, and you're basically dividing going this way. You're sharing up, you're going down into smaller parts. But it's part of the same base 10 system. Very important that you realize it's a base 10 system. I wanted to switch over to give you I wanted to give you something on the PowerPoint where you could actually it seems like we're having some technical difficulty in studio. We seem to be having some power interruption which is affecting our presentation. I wanted to carry across on our next activity. I would have shown you on the PowerPoint for you to look at. But I could basically try and mirror it for you where we could have I would have given you this, and I'm just letting you know that I'm not following the mathematics teacher's rule of drawing stuff that are not necessarily aligned properly. We have a power interruption, so I'll just quickly outline something for you. Might not be precise 100, but we have to improvise at time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I could label it point 1 all the way down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I could ask you to shade point 7 of the diagram. I could ask you to shade point 7 of the diagram, and just as I have point 7 here, it means that I would have to cover 7 of the regions. So I would shade right here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's at 7 actually. And this would represent point 7 of my diagram. What's another way of us writing point 7 using fraction? It would show that it is 7 out of 10 parts. Because decimals are also fractional parts. So you can use both your memory with fractions, and you can use it to help you with decimals. So I could ask you to shade, if I was working with fractions, I could ask you to shade 7/10. And I could make this into a larger grid where I could have it making 100 parts. I could also now go over to the other side where I could ask you, where I have a section that has 100 parts, I could ask you for the number, like if I had a 5 here, it would be 5 out of 100 parts. The 0 would be here. This would represent 5 out of 100 parts. So instead of having 10 parts here, I could create, let me just do this quickly. I could do this quickly. And I could create, coming down, strips 1, I could now transfer my board. Wanted to show you this on the PowerPoint. We're having a little technical challenge as there's a general power cut in the area, so I have to be improvising. And this would now move from so instead of shading the 7 broad strips here, I would now shade in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this would be a representation. Notice the area that I'm covering now. This would now be 5 out of 100 parts, or 0.05. So that's another way where I would have given you something to look at and to shade. It would have been much more unique. But as I said, we are having a general power cut, and so I have to now transfer to here. You could also play with your friends in class the game, where would I be located? So I could give you this, find the decimal point. I could give you this, find the decimal point. And I could give you the category where I'm spending cash, and I'll give you the words, 100, $110 and 21 cents. So I could give you these, and I could ask you to find where the decimal point, and we would know that when we're dealing with dollars and cents, the first two parts here would be for our cents right here. It would take up 2. And so our decimal point could be here. As I said, I would have given you this on a PowerPoint. We had a general power cut, and it affected what we were able to share with you. So I was just improvising as to where I could share with you different decimal games you can play with your friend. Did anybody remember the radio station? What's the radio station dial for NCU? If you can tell me that, you will get a prize for that. That is also using a decimal number. Now, as I said to you in recapping, we are going to recap one more time. I'll make sure that the questions are provided for you regarding the lesson that has been presented. And so, seeing that we have to make a little adjustments, I'll just make sure that I go over one last time for you to see. All right? So the decimal concept is very, very important. We say that we are using a base 10 system. It's a base 10 system, and it is referred to as the Indo-Arabic. Very important that you know this. It's a system of 10. You would have accustomed to having 10 ones, that makes 110, 10 tens, that makes 100s. In dealing with decimal numbers, it deals with values which are less than 1. And so the reverse is true. When you're moving to the left, you are going by groups of 10. When you're moving to the right, you are going also by groups of 10, but you are going towards a lesser value. So 100, let me write it on the board for you. 100 would contain 10 tens. And 110 would contain 10 units, or we would say ones. It's the same way we would have 1 unit, or 1 would now contain 10.1. And that's our fractional divide. It takes, for your fraction, you could also say 10 1/10, just for you to have a grip on that. This is for our fractional value. Our fractional value. And this is for our decimal value. So for decimal number to have its unique place, we have to use a decimal point. For fractional numbers to have their unique place, they have a numerator and a denominator. So we make the distinction, but the same value remains where it takes using base 10. We will use a 10 part. It should remind you of this, that while we chose a fractional value of 10 parts, it's because we are working with a base 10 system, and so we would have divided into 10 parts. And as I said, it's not a new concept. It's like when you're paying tithe to church, it's still the same base 10 where you pay 1/10. Very important that you understand that. All right? So in continuation of our revision here, this continue to infinity. The same thing happens right here. It goes to infinity. It's just that we use the parts that we are needed, that we want to use. So while you're in school, especially from primary to high school, peradventure, you will be working with your tenths or your 0.1, your hundredths, which is your 0.01, your 1,000 parts, 0.001, or your 10,000 parts when you're doing like significant figures, when you go to high school, fifth form and stuff like that. But for primary school, you would be more centered around your thousandths, your hundredths, your tenths, and you will come across. It's very important that you realize. Same concept I just show you across. 10 1,000th parts will give you 1 100th parts. And 10 100th parts will give you 1 1/10 parts, or 0.1. 10.01 parts will give you 1.1 part. And just as how I showed you with the slices of bread that are 10 slices together, 10.1 or 10 1/10 will give you 1 whole. So understanding decimal place value is similar to understanding our regular place value, which is a system of 10. So I hope and trust that you would have benefited. Before I go, I should tell you, as I said, when I leave studio, I'll be putting on my mask. I'll be making sure that I sanitize, and I will be making sure that I do my social distancing. So thank you again for coming to East Jamaica online platform. I hope we were able to learn something today. I must apologize. We had a power interruption that affected our presentation as it relates to giving you some assignments using the PowerPoint. I just put the diagrams on the board to give you an overview of what I would want to share with you. But I'll make sure that the content is available. If there's anyone who would like to get the lesson plan outline, I can also share this with you. So have a good afternoon, and I hope and trust that we would have gained something, and have a wonderful afternoon. May God continue to bless us all.